Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the world's 118th newest nostalgia-themed podcast. I'm Alex, and joining me as per usual is my recently rehomed co-host Stu Joslin. How are you, Stu?
Hi, Greenie. Yeah, lovely, thanks. Yeah, I'm speaking to you tonight really appropriately from my 90s childhood bedroom. I'm here because there's no internet in the new place yet, so I'm really getting a feel for the nostalgia tonight. It's a really good place to be.
Yeah, you're going to be bang on form then, aren't you? Because you're just the spirit is there. You're enveloped by nostalgia.
I'm surrounded by it. Surrounded.
Yeah, great. So if you don't already know, you probably do, but It'll Be Alright in the 90s is a podcast about the 90s and nostalgia and everything that's great about the decade and everything that makes us a little bit misty-eyed. Today we're going to be dusting off our tax discs and pulling out the manual choke and talking about the cars of the 90s. So we're going to talk about a number of things. So what the things we remember about the car design of the time, the cars our parents owned, cars that were owned by the parents of our friends, cars that we had on our walls, and that sort of thing. So it's going to be diesel fumed, choked sort of chat.
4-star.
And, yeah. And okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get cracking.
So I was just thinking, Stu, when did you first become sort of conscious of car design and cars? And when did you sort of first get interested in cars?
It's been there for as long as I can remember, really. I can't remember a particular point where I sort of became obsessed with it. My favorite toys when I was very young were the toy cars, always the Matchbox and the Corgi and things like that. Hot Wheels weren't really around in the UK then, so it was Matchbox and Corgi, and maybe that's where it sprung from. But I had toy cars of all different types and everything like that, and pretty soon I was able to identify every car on the road, like when I was out and about with my folks and everything like that. I specifically remember it's still there. So if we've got any local listeners listening, the garage in Corsham, S&K Autos on Pickwick Road there, always used to have these big bay doors which were open, and they had the 3 ramps in there to work on the cars. And whenever my grandparents were looking after me when my parents were at work during the school holidays or whatever, and we'd walk into town, they'd always stop for me outside the garage on the other side of the road so I could look in and see what cars they had, and I'd tell them all the different makes and models and everything. And it's just something that's stuck with me since, obviously, coming into the modern times when design has become more uniform and more streamlined and everything like that, and there's not so much maybe there's not so much variety anymore as there used to be, and not so many right angles and straight lines in car design. My interest has tailed off a little bit, but when it comes to cars of the 80s and specifically the 90s, I'm right there, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost exactly the same for me. There was I can't remember the exact first point, but there was a birthday or a Christmas where I was given a absolutely stunning Barago. I don't know if do you know Barago? They
yes,
make
absolutely.
Yeah, sort
the Italian,
of die-cast.
Yeah.
Die-cast model cars, and I was given I think it was a 1/18th scale, so fairly big, sky blue Lancia Spider by my parents. And I'm not sure what prompted them to get it for me. I think it was the first car thing I was ever given. I think I probably had Matchbox cars that we picked up at boot sales and stuff and hand-me-downs, but this was like a real distinct present and very sort of obviously car focused. And I think that's probably when it started. And from that point on, I just collected loads of model cars, Barago mainly. And then I moved on to the sort of more high-end sort of Formula One, mini champ sort of stuff. But I'm just fascinated, I think, by the miniature thing. Anything in miniature that looks perfect, I think is just really aesthetically appeals to me. And so it came from there. And then since then, like you, I kind of got to build up my knowledge and recognize what was on the road, and just sort of build up a completely pointless database of information about what everything was, so I could identify what was on the road. But and it has carried on, and now there's YouTube videos of of any car you can think of, motoring journalists with their own channels, and it's very hard not to waste a lot of time on there. But yeah, that's where it started for me. So yeah, very similar to you. Maybe do you want to what cars did you dream about? Did you have any posters on your wall, any car posters, or was it all football?
It was there were some cars as well. It's really boring actually. I was thinking about this earlier, and for me it's quite boring because my dream car was always just the car that my dad had at the time, because I was obsessed with the idea of being able to drive and having a car to look after. And I used to go out and help him clean whatever car it was every Sunday, even when he didn't want to. I used to I used to make him do it so I could just be around the car. If I had to identify one from that period, which would be a dream car for me, I would probably have to go with the XJ220. The Jaguar, the supercar that what turned out not to be so super.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a read up on it earlier, and I think it was about £500,000 at the time, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, purchase price. And in the end, they ended up changing the spec of the car before people got their hands on it, and then people were trying to pull out of the deal to buy it because it wasn't. They were trying to claim it wasn't the same car, but then they managed to prove it was, and these people were stuck with buying it, and it ended up not being such a great success. But like you said earlier with your Lancia Spider, I think I had a Burago as well, a silver XJ220 model. It's probably still in the cupboard, which is just in front of me actually somewhere. But I remember just having that and looking at the sweeping lines and the coupe shape and the bonnet at the back, the sort of hood thing which was transparent, so you could see the engine inside. And yeah, it was just breathtaking that such a thing could exist, and you could aspire to own one of these things. And like I say, it ended badly, but it ended badly really for that car. And as I understand it, I think again, having looked today, there was one that came up last year it was like in time warp condition, they call it. And I think it was up for about £125,000 or something. So
it's such an iconic 90s car, isn't it? Like, for all its shortcomings and everything, it's iconic in that way. Yeah, I think it was supposed to have a V12 engine, wasn't it? And then it ended up having just like a V6. And
yeah.
I may be wrong about this. I know it's true of the XJ-R15 or another Jaguar of the era, but I think with the XJ220 it might also have Rover tail lights. If you look at the tail lights on it, you can quite easily transplant them in your mind onto the back of a Rover 214. Is that sort of era? I think it happened a lot more then. I don't think it happened so much now, where especially British manufacturers would borrow stuff from either their parent companies or other companies just to cut down on the cost a little bit. So you'll get incredible sweeping lines and just mind-bending design, but then Rover taillights on the back.
I just like to correct myself actually. I've just realised I said that a Rover XJ220, a Jaguar XJ220 sold for 125 grand last year. It definitely can't have done. It would have been 10 times that at least. I just want to correct myself there and not come across as somebody who doesn't really know what they're talking about.
I thought you. Well, heaven forbid anyone ever think that about it. It'll be all right in the 90s. I thought you were saying that because you were saying like it's depreciated. It was such a sort of flop in a way that it was selling for far less than it was at the time.
I think I got mixed up, and I think what I read was that the last one that was made was sold for that much in about 1997 or something. One of the last ones that came up, because he ended up obviously not being able to sell them. Yeah, and I think the last one was sold for about 127 or something. So I've just mixed up some numbers there. So don't write in. I do apologise.
That's. I think you should write. People should write in because we need to be told. Yeah, I think for me that sort of thing as well. I think I definitely remember having a calendar of 90s supercars, and that was on there. But I think actually now I think about it, a lot of the cars I had on my wall were probably more 80s cars. So the Lamborghini Countach and maybe the Testarossa. I'm not sure if the F40, maybe that was 89 or 90. I can't remember if that was 90 or 89, but that sort of thing. But then it moved on a bit through the decade as I got into, say, touring cars. So I had a Ford Mondeo ST, sporty version of that. And then I got into Gran Turismo, the incredible PlayStation game. and so that sort of led to the Japanese imports, so like the Skylines and the Supras and the
Hmm.
NSXs. So it sort of it evolved over the decade, but now I'm at the point where you kind of were at the time, where I love the 90s cars that are sort of, hot hatches and stuff, nothing that showy, but like a Peugeot 205 GTI or
Oh,
a
beautiful.
Williams Renault Clio, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
That's what I dream of now.
And the gold
Or
alloys. Oh,
yeah, oh
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
fantastic.
Or a Rover 220 Coupe, which our mutual friend Tim Parker and I have lusted after since we were 16, and yeah, still do lust after it to this day. Yeah, maybe we should talk about cars that your parents did have then, because you mentioned there that what your dad owned was kind of your dream at the time. What
Yeah.
did he own?
Well, there's one specifically which is the one that I can sort of remember the most about, because I think I was about sort of 6 or 7 years old when he got it, and he had it up until I was sort of starting secondary school. But he started in the 90s with a Mark II red Ford Escort, which was T registered, so it's 1979 if my notes are correct here. And I've actually, because as discussed in the previous episode, because I have a sort of photographic memory for registration plates, I've been able to put all the registration plates for the cars we're talking about into the DVLA's online checker
Nice.
and see if I can find out any more info. So the 79 Escort actually lasted until 1992. So it was on the road for 13 years. Sadly, it's not around anymore. But yeah, he bought it off of a family member, my uncle Colin, and that was, I think, presumably it was the car that I was brought home from hospital in after I was born.
I thought you were going to say conceived in for a second there. But coming home from hospital, yeah, it's more wholesome. That's
well,
fair.
when I was doing my research with my dad earlier, I didn't ask that question. Maybe I can answer that in a future episode. But yeah, so and there's one big story about this car, which is really the sort of only one I know really, which is that my uncle Colin was a larger than life character. He loved to joke, and he was loved by lots of people, had lots of friends. After my dad had taken on the ownership of the car, he was with my mum and maybe had me in the car as well. I don't know. And they were driving down Box Hill towards Box from Corsham. And somebody who was coming the other way saw the red Escort coming in their direction, moved over to my dad's side of the road, driving directly towards them, like flashing their lights, and then swerved back over to the other side of the road again. Yeah. And the general consensus is that it was one of my Uncle Colin's friends who recognised the car and thought that my Uncle Colin would be driving and was just trying to have a little bit of a joke with him. But obviously, you never did find out. But
yeah,
but yeah, that's the big story around the Escort.
And those classic games of chicken gags that
indeed.
you get a lot in Northwest Wiltshire.
It's well known for it. It's well known.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a sign of affection. If you're driving across, maybe you're around Malmesbury or you're in the Melksham area, and someone moves over and heads directly towards you at 60 miles an hour, it's a sign of affection. Don't worry.
That's it. Yeah, it's just a friend letting you know that they're there and that they've recognised your number plate from afar, presumably.
Yeah, exactly.
I can go on then to tell you about the car that replaced the Escort. Which was another Mark II and another Ford, but it was a Mark II Fiesta this time. 1100 litre Popular Plus model. Nice. So very, very posh. Deregistered, so 1987. I've had a check, and it was last taxed on the 1st of June 2000. So again, it lasted for 13 years on the road. And I wanted to talk about this car because it forms one of my very earliest memories. Now, where my parents and I lived at the time was in a place called Hitherspring in Corsham. I don't know if you know it. You may well.
I do.
And the house was a little bit strange because when you go into the front door, you actually come in on the landing on the stairs. So you go down to obviously the living room and the kitchen, and then up the stairs to the bedrooms and the bathroom and everything.
Yeah.
And as a result, the windows in the living room were facing towards the road, were high up on the wall and almost at street level.
Mhm.
So you're looking up to street level. And I can clearly remember being excited because my dad had gone to fetch his new car and looking out of this window and seeing the Mark II Fiesta roll up into the parking space outside.
That's nice.
Yeah. It was a lovely shade of maroon.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, it lasted us for a few years. It didn't have any in-car entertainment, so I remember when I got a bit older and my folks took me to Blue Anchor Bay in Minehead, I think. I'm not too sure. There was a chalet there that we stayed in, but I had a tiny little battery-operated stereo in my bedroom, and we decided it'd be a good idea to take that and see if we could get some radio reception in the car for the journey down.
Yeah.
But it never worked, unfortunately. The airwaves weren't stable enough at that point to allow that to happen. And there's another family connection which ends this, because it was sold on to one of my cousins, who took it on as one of their first cars, and it met. Well, I was about to say it met an untimely end at the Hare and Hounds roundabout in Corsham, when there was a bit of an RTA, and the car got taken away. But that was in about 1996, and obviously we've just seen here that the car was taxed in as late as 2000, and also the DVLA records say that it was cream by then as well. So presumably in colour. So presumably somebody saved it from the scrapyard, fixed it up, gave it a respray, and gave it another lease of life for a few years.
Yeah, sounds like a classic cut and shut job.
Possibly.
Probably
But again,
half of. Gone.
Yeah. Just like with the game of chicken, I suppose we'll never know. But as you say,
Yeah.
It's probably the front half of that car, and etc. etc.
Yeah. I wonder if you still get cut and shuts these days. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
Although
exactly. Yeah.
there's nostalgic value in them, so maybe I hope they do still do it.
I bet there's a few stories about 90s cut and shuts. I bet there are.
Yeah. So yeah, I think if I'm keeping it to the 90s, I think the first car I remember, I think my parents having, I kind of remember more through photos than actually remembering it itself, was also a Mark II Escort.
Mm-hmm.
It was a white one. It was an estate, white with a red pinstripe. Very nice. First car I remember existing and sort of being aware of was a red Talbot Alpine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you will literally never see one of these on the road anymore. And you haven't seen them on the road for about 30 years. But I'm not sure if that was in the 80s or 90s. But the first car that really had a meaning for me definitely was in the 90s, which was a Mark IV Escort. It was an F-Reg. Do you know what that? I off the top of my head, I'm not sure what that is. Is that 88 or something? An F-Reg?
So if we're saying D is 87, then F must be 89. So they did it once a year then, didn't they? So I think yeah.
That
so
sounds right.
Yeah, 89. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was that lovely. It was a 3-door, 1.3, I think. That lovely blue that Ford did around that time. I think you maybe had did you have a Fiesta at one point?
Yes.
I think it was in the same colour blue. Yeah, the same.
Okay.
The same blue, which I really like. You don't really see so much anymore. And it used to be my grandpa's, and then he gave it to my dad, to my mum and dad. So it was in the family straight away. There'd already been this lineage, and then later on, when my brother came of age, he was given access to it, and it sort of half became his car as well as my dad's. And then when I came of age, it was the first car I ever drove when I was first practicing. And so it'd been through 3 generations of the same family, and then also me and my brother being one generation as well. And it was just, we went on family holidays in it, and I just did everything because we were one car family at that point. So we did have to do everything in the 3-door Escort, and we lived in the countryside as well. So, you can't walk anywhere. So it had a big part of our history, our family history. And eventually we did sell it. I can't quite remember why we had to sell it, but we sold it for a couple £100 or something to some bloke. And then it was only a few weeks later, the police came round or rang up and said, this car that's registered to you has been found abandoned in a ditch or upside down in the field.
Oh, right.
And they think maybe it'd been used for something dodgy. We couldn't have it back. It was abandoned, but they wouldn't let us have it back. I think it just went to scrap. So it was a really sad end for something that had been, such a big part of the family history.
Yeah.
So that was, yeah, a really sad end for something that had meant a lot and, yeah, seen a lot. And it wasn't quite replaced because there was actually a crossover. There was a point where we became a 2-car family. So the second car was also a Mark IV Escort, but it was a yellow estate, 5-door estate.
Mm.
I think it used to be an old British Telecom vehicle. It's because it's that exact color of yellow.
I see. Yeah,
it's an unusual color to have for normal range of Ford.
Absolutely.
So that had much less of a story really for the family, but it did eventually get written off in a pretty nasty crash on the A350, the Laycock Junction, which my mum and brother were in the car and kind of quite lucky to walk away from. But that was a more dramatic end to that one. And they were, yeah, those are the 2 cars that sort of stand out in my childhood. And there were some later things like a Rover 214, I guess second generation, pre-facelift, Honda engine. And the Rover 214s, there was a point, I think in my social group especially, where everyone had them. Like our friend Tim had one, our friend Chris had one, and they were just everywhere. So that was a big part of my sort of adolescence, the Rover 200, with that luxury walnut effect panel that all Rovers had at that time. Yeah, my dad once said that he really liked it. It felt like the first car he'd ever had that was kind of luxurious because of the way the door sounded when it closed. That was something that kind of stood out. So that was, yeah, that's kind of my family history of 90s cars. What is there anything about 90s cars that particularly stands out to you as like what about the car design of the 90s that stands out to you or appeals to you or doesn't appeal to you maybe?
Well, like I said at the top there, with the way things are now, what I sort of yearn for is the fact that you don't get these singular designs anymore. Like when, well, I was just about to say Volvo, but I suppose Volvo do still do it, or did do it up until recently. But when you see when you used to see the Volvo, was it the 740 Saloon, which was literally just 2 small lines at the front and back with a big box in the middle, and then it was totally perfectly symmetrical and everything like that. And you just really don't see those unique sort of hallmark designs of manufacturers anymore. And I also used to enjoy seeing like when you used to see the odd Yugo about, you know, the small, or a Lada. I think there was a teacher at school when we were there who had a Lada. I can't remember who, but I do remember there always being one around in like the car park and stuff when I was walking to and from school. But that kind of thing where you would see a design and it would be like the trademark of a certain manufacturer. I just think now, like, you know, if I saw a Nissan Juke coming the other way, I wouldn't be able to tell you if it was a Nissan Juke or a Suzuki Vitara or whatever, because if you've got a certain type of car, it's going to be a certain design, and that seems to be the way forward. I'm not knocking that, because obviously there's safety implications with that as well, and I'm sure that a modern Nissan Juke is a lot safer than a Yugo.
Yeah, probably just about.
I'll have to look into some stats for that. But yeah, just the fact that, and like I said, I was able to point out every car on the road, and that would have been because of the design mainly. You know, you were able to pick those out. And now I don't think you can do that. And I was actually about to mention earlier, did you ever have the I Spy book of cars?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I had at least one of them. Yeah, I'm not sure how many there were, but yeah.
So the little sort of A5 or A6 books, where then it would have all different cars on it, and you would tick them off if you saw them, and they'd give you'd get points as well. So if you saw like a Ferrari, it'd be worth 20 points, but if you saw a Vauxhall Astra, it'd be worth 5.
Yeah.
So I used to be obsessed with those as well, and I think again in my cupboard there, I've still got a couple of books where it's like review of the year for cars like 1994 or 1995 or something like that. And they would be my favorite books, just looking at the pictures, looking at the statistics and everything like that. Yeah, just when it comes to design, just the fact that you used to be able to spot something and say without any question, you know, that's a Renault, and now you can't do that, and I think it's a shame that we've lost that, you know.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I was actually going to use the Nissan Juke as an example of where car design has gone, and where I think it's gone wrong as well. That is an absolutely appalling looking vehicle. I think, I agree about there was a much more distinction between the different manufacturers, and just a range of different styles. I think the thing that stands out most to me about when I see a 90s car on the road, or an 80s car, something that would have been around in the 90s now, they're just so much smaller. Because I think, like I was saying, we had the Mark IV Escort 3-door was our family car. If you put a Mark IV Escort next to what would be the equivalent now, which is a Focus, they're so much smaller. There's nothing to them. And I saw my friend sent me a picture of a Rover 800 of that era, sort of late 90s, I suppose. I think, but I guess before it became the Rover 75. But that used to be a big car, that was a big, big family car, luxurious, 5-door or 4-door, and then this car happened to be parked next to, I think it was just a Golf, and a brand new Golf or a brand new Focus, and it was smaller. It was like an optical illusion. It didn't make sense. This massive car was so much smaller, and it really made that stand out. And I suppose that's because it's safety, isn't it? Like, it's all safety features. Yeah. In those days, it was a thin sheet of steel, some grey plastic, and a lot of glass. That was what made up a 90s car.
And some wood effect paneling if you happen to have a Rover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was probably quite safe, actually, wasn't it? Added some structural rigidity. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I did notice. I think it was an Austin Maestro I saw the other day, and I was just really struck at how much glass there was. Like, everything below, if you're sat in it, everything below your ribcage was, everything above your ribcage was basically glass.
Yeah.
You think if that rolled over, it would just flatten to nothing. It'd go 2D. So I guess it's the safety, isn't it? They've added in all these side impact bars and stuff, which I guess is fair enough. I can't really complain about that.
No, definitely. It was good while it lasted, but in the end, we have to concede to making the roads far safer, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that's a fair swap.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any cars of that era that you really didn't like at the time? Like, anything you just thought that is an unattractive car right there?
I don't think so. I don't really think I thought about it like that. I was just appreciative of literally everything that was out there, and I think maybe when you get older, you begin to realize, that doesn't look very good, or that hasn't been designed very well, or something like that. I was literally into everything,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think if there was anything at the time.
I mean, that's nice. That's nice that you're a positive young boy, and with no ounce of cynicism in your heart. I mean, I guess when I thought about this before coming here tonight, and then I couldn't really think of anything other than the Volvo 340, which I always thought was an ugly car, just ugly and not very cool. I don't know if you can picture a 340. It was like I guess it was the smallest Volvo in the range.
It's like a sort of fastback type thing.
Yeah, kind of. It was just. I mean, it goes along with what you said about how unique car design was back then, and how distinct different manufacturers were. But it's really hard to describe. It wasn't like anything now. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see one now, though, of course, because so nostalgic. But at the time, I was not a fan. And what about cars that you were envious of your friends' parents having? Was there anything that you were like, I wish my parents had that?
I did have a little think about this, yeah. And one of my, if I may sidestep from cars and go into more sort of utility vehicles, the one that I always thought would be really fun was my dad's friend Chris, who's a self-employed builder and jack of all trades. He still has one now, but it's a lot newer now. But for years he had a Nissan Capstar. C-plate, 1986.
I can't picture that.
It's like a sort of halfback truck type thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he helped us, or he helped the family move into the house where I'm talking to you from now, with that particular vehicle, and it just always seemed to be it was something different. None of my other friends' parents had anything like that, and it just seemed like a lot of fun, and so I'm not sure I ever actually got to go in it, unfortunately, but I always admired it when it was around. The other thing was that my dad, again, nothing much changes. I'm in the same house, and my dad still works for the same company, same engineering firm, all these years later. And when I was young and on school holidays, and like I say, staying with my grandparents because my parents were at work, occasionally, if he was sent out to deliver something, he would, and he knew I was around, he would drop by and pick me up and take me on the delivery run. Just for a little trip out. And the firm at the time had a Vauxhall Astra van, and I'm guessing it must have been an H or a J. It just I don't know whether something clicked inside my dad when he drove it because it was different to his regular car or something, but it just seemed to be so much faster and more live and everything than the Fiesta. And it was always, when I saw it pull up outside, I was always like, drop everything, I'm not playing with you anymore, whoever's come round, I'm going out with my dad in the Astra van.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are two of the cars that I wish maybe had featured more in my life for sure. How about you, man?
Yeah, I distinctly remember one of my friends in primary school when we had the old Fiesta, the old Escort. Sorry, his family had, because his dad was like a proper businessman, kind of suits and ties, and never really saw him in the evenings. If I went around to play, I think I may be wrong about this. It might have been a Ford Granada, which was like top of the range Ford at that time. It might have just been a Sierra, but it was a brand new Sierra if it was that, and it just felt so much more than our old Escort, the next generation. So I wasn't that envious of that, but it was like aspirational, and it was the next level. And one of my other friends from primary school, called Thomas, his parents had a Morris Minor, which was like nothing else. I would get taken like back to his house in it quite often, and it's sort of, it sounds like a classic car. It just sounds completely different, and it was, I guess, they were probably unchanged from when they were first made, whenever that was in the 50s or 60s. So that was always nice. That was a bit of fun. And yeah, not technically a parent, but I don't think, I'm pretty sure you don't know this about me, Jocelyn, but I noticed that actually ties in with the Pink Floyd poster you have behind you. But there was a brief period when I was growing up where I happened to live on the estate of Pink Floyd drummer Nick Mason, who lives in Corsham. Well, I don't know if he still does, but he did. And he is famous, aside from Pink Floyd, for having one of the biggest and best car collections in the world.
Yep.
And I happened to be there when he took delivery of the Ferrari Daytona, which I believe, I was told at the time, I'm not sure if this is true, but it was the Ferrari Daytona that won Daytona, which gave it the name Daytona, because I think that's probably not its technical name.
So it's the OG Daytona.
Yeah, and I mean, which is probably, I cannot imagine what that's worth now, but I remember that being delivered on the back of a trailer, and so that's I just had to throw that in there as a bit of crazy car history from my past.
I can't claim to have lived on his estate, but I have lived on the farm next to his estate. So I can claim to have been Nick Mason's next door neighbour.
Nice. It's a small town, Corsham. It's everything's connected.
We've all lived there at one point. We've all lived on Nick Mason's estate at one point. If you've lived in Corsham, if you've done the rounds.
Yeah, and if you've been driving down, say, the A4 in Corsham, and Ferrari F40s come and moves onto the other side of the road and comes directly at you at 90 miles an hour, well, that's my old mate Nick Mason doing the old North Wiltshire chicken game.
Do you know, I saw him in Sainsbury's car park the other month, but he was driving just a brand new Golf. Unfortunately, it wasn't anything particularly interesting. But there you go.
Maybe he's lost all his money. Maybe he's blown all his money.
Possibly. I haven't told you about the last car of my dad's from the 90s.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get it in there. Once the Fiesta had been sold and then crashed and then subsequently brought back to life, which obviously we didn't know about until just now, my dad bought a K-plate, so this is 92 now, we're moving up the years, silver 4x4 version, Mark III Vauxhall Cavalier. Now, this was a tasty car, right? So it's 2 litre, spoiler, and this has now got an in-car entertainment system. So we've got so this is when I start making mixtapes and stuff for the car when we're going to like football matches around the county and stuff. And this is the car that I absolutely adored. This is the one that the one out of, if I could bring back any of the 3 we've spoken about, it'd definitely be the Cavalier. And my dad still says to this day that he regrets the day that he chopped it in for an L-Reg Ford Mondeo, which is absolutely unforgivable still. And that doesn't count for this podcast because he got that in 2000, 2001, I think. So we're not going to discuss that. But I started buying. I used to get like little bits and pieces for it. Like I remember seeing an Aston Villa air freshener one day in like Halfords or something. So I bought that with my pocket money. My dad let me put it in the car, curiously, because he follows Chelsea, but he was driving around with a Villa air freshener in his car. And yeah, it was a superb car. I loved it very much. And like I say, he still regrets the day that he got rid of it. And he says that he should have used the money that he bought used to buy the Mondeo in just fixing up the Cavalier a little bit more. Because I think it was a bit rough around the edges by that point. And he just went full steam ahead for a new car instead of lavishing a bit of love and attention. And there's no doubt that I would be driving it now if it was still here. You know.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, that's a shame. Stu's dad, what were you thinking?
There we are. And I looked up the registration plate on the DVLA, but there's no records for it. It's vanished. It seems to have vanished completely. So yeah.
Maybe that was the front half of the Cream Fiesta.
Possibly. Purchased from Downend Motors on the outskirts of Bristol.
Oh yeah, I know Downend. Yeah.
Yeah, but I actually I remember going with my dad to pick up the car as well, and it was obviously pre-internet, and he was a bit worried about. He obviously was going to pick the car up and then go and tax it at the post office, like when we got home, and he was worried about the half-hour drive without without tax.
Yeah.
But obviously there was no real way around it, so it had to be done.
That's the sort of car I can imagine the police sort of having a little bit of an interest in if it drove past. So I think he got lucky there.
Yeah, no, it was. It was great. It was great, and to this day, I've loved Cavaliers. That's my sort of make and model that I enjoy sort of looking at and reading about the most. And I did see one for sale. I think it was a G plate or an H plate a few years back, and it was only about £1,000, and it looked in decent nick, and only had about 70,000 on the clock and something like that. And I did have half a thought towards it, but in the end, I had to let it go, But there you go. Maybe one day when I've made my millions, I'll get a G plate Cavalier. Forget the XJ220. Forget Everest.
Yeah. Well, when the listenership of this podcast gets so high that we can somehow monetize it, that can be your first treat for yourself, can't it?
Sounds good. Let's make it happen, listeners. Tell your friends, pass it around, and let's get me that Cavalier. Fantastic.
# get Joz the Cavalier.
We'll get some T-shirts printed up and everything. That'll be great.
Okay. I think that pretty much rounds everything up. Do you have anything finally you want to add?
Not really. I mean, I think we've covered that off pretty well. I have so enjoyed thinking about this and preparing the notes and then talking to you about it, Greenie, and hearing your car history as well. One thing I probably should mention is that another uncle of mine in the family, Uncle Sandy, was before they became sort of an acceptable make, was a diehard Skoda man. So all through the 90s, he had a succession of Skoda favourites. I remember there was a white one on a G plate, and then there was a red one on an M plate, which replaced that. And right up until, sadly, he's no longer with us, but right up until he had to surrender his license, he was a big Skoda man. And it was good to have that around as well. And that's, again, going back to the specific design being a hallmark of a particular car. You knew when a Skoda was coming, definitely. So yeah. But no, just to say, I've really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed this one. And again, much like our previous episodes, I think there's plenty more meat on these bones, and we can definitely go back and have another look.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just going to shamelessly plug my own other Instagram, which is called Cars Your Parents Owned. So check me out. That's where I search for old 90s cars and 80s cars that I find on the streets, and I post them on there. So it's a sort of a personal treasure hunt that I'm always on. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, then check me out. Give me a follow. And speaking of social media and following, don't forget that our Twitter account is at allright90s. That's all letters at allright90s. And you can email us also on allright90s@gmail.com, because we'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts you have about your car history, your feelings on the cars of the 90s, car design, what you had on your wall, what you didn't like. Yeah, so get in contact. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, do get in touch. Do give Alex a follow on Casual Parent Owned, because it's a fantastic feed. I love seeing his new posts. And where I've just moved to, there's a couple floating around there that I've next time I'm passing them, I'll have to send in my submissions to you. So,
please do.
Yeah,
please
but yeah,
do
get in touch with us, whether it is to correct me on the price that an XJ220 was sold for, or anything else you want to get in touch about. Please do. We'd love to hear from you. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Any angry Volvo 340 owners out there can send me some reviews. Okay, great. Well, that wraps up then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new topic from the 90s, and until then, I'll see you later, Jocelyn.
Yeah, stay cool. See you next time, mate.
Cheerio.
Bye for now.